my first demo like this, so I thought this would be a good idea because so many people are always asking about the wax. The chalk paint people get, and I do lots of chalk painting in the store to show people, but it really helps to see how easy the wax is to use. So first tell you about Annie. Annie is an artist, an author from Oxford, England, and she developed chalk paint and the wax 30 years ago. This year marks 30 years. So she's a fine artist, she really understands paint, and so she came up with this. So all the products kind of work together, and you can paint something, wax something, paint something right over the wax, and re-wax it in, so you really can't ever mess up. This is an old sample. I've been selling this for 8.5 years, and this is a sample I did in the beginning, and it kind of just quickly shows the paint by itself and then the paint with the wax. Okay? What's nice about it is this is the wax here if you want to smell it. That's the clear wax. There's hardly any odor. Chalk paint by itself is no odor. It's water-based, so we paint in here all the time, and I get more comments about my candles, my perfumes, my soaps. No one ever complains about the paint. So that's kind of a nice change from back in the days when you had latex and oil and the whole bit. There are 4 waxes now. So we have a clear wax, we have a white wax, a dark wax, and a black wax. So what I was going to do to start is I painted this board up just today. This is Old Violet, which is here, and it's also here. This, by the way, is the full color chart. Annie is up to 44 colors right now. I have 43 on here. I keep forgetting to paint Lemon, which is a soft gray color. But all the colors are here. But these all do not have any wax on them. And so you'll see that, like, for example, this is Old Violet. It definitely changes a little bit from with wax and without wax. And I think part of that is the way that the light reflects onto the surface. It's not that it doesn't yellow it or anything like that. It just changes it ever so slightly. So what I was going to do is show you on this one board how all the different waxes really change. Because it really can make a difference. You could buy 1 can of paint and 2 tins of wax or 3 tins of wax and really make subtle differences in all your different pieces all within the same room. And I think that's important to know. So I'm just going to separate this. The first one I'm going to do down here is the white wax. And so you can see the difference going from the clear to the white. So I'm going to grab a brush. These are that's a lot of wax. These are Annie's wax brushes. So, and I'm just going to brush a little bit on. And you don't have to go with the grain, you can go against the grain. And I often tell people with wax, when wax first came to the US with the chalk paint, everybody was complaining. They were like, oh, I have to work so hard at this. My arm's hurting, my elbow's hurting. Everybody was working way too hard. Annie was going, what's the problem? Putting on the wax is so easy. So this was already a very pretty difference. Now I put on a base coat of wax, and you can see already how it really changes it, and it's already nicely soft. Now the wax, when it goes on, will be a little, I don't want to say greasy, but it's, you can feel it when it first goes on. And then what you want to do is you let it dry for at least a couple hours. Overnight is best. And then you come back and buff it out, and it gets really, really nice. Now, most projects that we do, 1 layer of wax is sufficient. But if I'm doing like kitchen cabinets, if I'm doing a heavy-duty table or a dresser that's going to take a lot of abuse of bathroom vanity, I would definitely do 2 coats of wax. That's really key. So you put 1 coat of wax on, you wipe it back, you let it dry overnight, you buff it out, you put another coat on, follow the same process, and you're good to go. And it's very, very durable. I'm just going to move the tape over. So what I was going to do now is actually wax from here to here. I'm going to do the clear wax. So you see that. And then I'm going to keep the white wax on here because we are going to go back then, and I want to show you the wax can also be used just on bare wood. The reason it works on bare wood versus the chalk paint surface is that bare wood is very porous, and so it will absorb into that just as well as it will absorb into the chalk paint. So now I'm going to take another brush, get a little bit of wax on. And putting wax on, they gave a great analogy when I first picked up the chalk paint line that really has stuck with me. Putting wax on is like putting lotion on your skin. If you've ever put lotion on your arms, you rub it on, you just rub it on. If you rub too much on, what are you doing? You're looking for other places to put it because it sits on the surface and it's just not feeling right. That wax is the same way. If you get just the right amount in, it works into the pores of the paint. If you have too much, it sits on top and it's yucky. And if you miss a spot, what do? You get a little more lotion, you rub it in. It works the same way. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to wipe it back. And I'm going to take this and get it into here. Now Annie uses old t-shirts, old sheets, anything like that. I, for whatever reason, I just don't have time to go searching, and this is just easier. I like Bounty paper towels or Viva paper towels. Now you can feel that already. And that's it. So that's as easy as getting the wax on is. Now what I wanted to also do, I'm going to leave that on. Now see the difference between the two? Now I'm going to leave this part clear, and then I was going to put some dark wax on here and then some black wax. Now when we use the dark waxes and the black waxes, Annie really recommends that we tell you to put clear wax on first. Because chalk paint is so porous, if you put just the dark wax down, it will stain it. Now I'm going to show you that down here, so you'll see it with the clear wax, and then you'll see it with the dark wax, or without the clear wax. So I'm going to do this. So this is very dark. I always think of this as like shoe polish. Spot on my rag. Actually, I'm going to separate this. So this is the dark. Now the dark is a brown wax, so the brown will kind of just warm it up. And I can push this into the crevices if I want. If you're doing a big project, you might even want to wear gloves when you're doing the dark wax, because it will get on your fingers. But all of this is washable with soap and water. That's the other thing I like. You're not using any harsh chemicals. Now, that's just with straight dark wax. If I find I get too much on, I can always go back in and get a little clear wax. And I can soften it up. So see how that changes it? So you don't really see how strong of a difference it is until you take away the tape. Okay? Remind me to show you. Annie has a book. Well, she has lots of books. She's written 25 books. But there's one book I like. I just sold my last copy, but I have one myself. It's called Quick and Easy, and she actually shows a dresser in there. And what's neat about it, she paints the whole thing with Paris gray and old white. And then parts of it she goes in and she adds the detail of the dark wax. So it actually looks like it's painted with 3 colors, but it's really only 2 colors and the changing of the wax. So you can really use this in multiple ways without having to go buy tons of product. So that was the dark wax. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get as much of the dark wax off as I can. And I'm now going to dip into the black wax. When when I first started, she only had clear wax and dark wax. And now, since I've been doing this so long, she added the black and the white. So now I'm gonna. The black wax to me is really pretty, especially with a lot of the tones that are going on right now, because everybody loves like grays and whites. And what I like about it is it doesn't brown it; it just sort of darkens it and makes it feel like this. To me, feels more like a like a charcoal gray or something. It should be really pretty. This color was actually just featured in, I'm trying to think which magazine. There was a really pretty bench, and they showed the whole bench was painted with old violet, just with a nice clear wax, like in an entry hall, and it was gorgeous. And the trick to it, it's no arm muscle, it's just spreading it out till it's done. Take this just to get. So you can really see white, clear, dark, and black. But these two have the clear underneath, whereas the white does not. The white, I tend to like it just by itself, because I like how it gets caught up in that texture. Now, if I spin this around this way, you know what, I'm going to do the black wax first since that's on my brush. This down here has no clear underneath. And I'm not saying any of this, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's knowing what look are you desiring to get at the end. Like if you were doing a painted piece of furniture, like you see how that little end table there has a black top and white legs? So if you say you painted the whole thing old violet, and then the legs were really bright and colorful, you could just go over the top with black wax, and it would give you that two-tone effect without having to get another color. Now if I'm painting a dresser, I tend to like to work in sections. You wouldn't want to brush the entire dresser with the wax all at one time and then try to wipe it down. I try to work at it a section at a time. Like I would do like one drawer front, then I would do another drawer front and work my way down, and then do like the side panels. I probably would do the top last, because I find sometimes the top is I don't want to say the most difficult, but it's where our eye is most critical. And so by the time you've done everything else, you really become a pro and you feel comfortable with it. So see the difference between this and this. Now there's times when this is exactly what you want, and that's great. I just want you to know the difference and that you have control. The other thing is I could come back on here, tape that off, and put a second layer on, and I could get it close to this. It might just not be quite as much. Now the advantage to this, with the clear underneath, get a new rag, is that if I wanted to, I could come back in and polish in a few places. And you see how it's those highlights, the places where it gets a little brighter in a few places and a little darker in other places. That's what starts to look really pretty and interesting on, on the right piece of furniture. So just have to, okay, so that was the dark lid. I'm gonna close this up. And I wanna go back in and add the dark one on here. And then we can jump to the next thing. So on this one, I'm going to use just the straight dark wax with no clear. I don't really want to touch that. Whenever you use a wax brush, it's really important after your whole use is to wipe it down with a dry rag right away. I unfortunately ruined a brush or two when I wasn't doing that. And then the other mistake I made is I tried to wash this directly in the sink without wiping off the excess wax, and my drain got really clogged. That was not so much fun. I'm in the dark. Now people often ask, if I put wax on, do I have to re-wax it all the time? That's one of the questions I get. And no, you don't. It really depends on how you're using the piece of furniture or the cabinetry. If you're, first of all, after you've painted and waxed a piece, if you've given it the proper time to cure, it's going to hold up for you really well. We say that can be anywhere from 5 days to 28 days, and that really depends on a whole bunch of variables. What type of piece of furniture was it? What surface was it on? Is it a hot, humid day in the summer? Is it a cool day in the winter? Do I have a fan going on it? How thick did I put the wax on? But we say anywhere from 5 to 28 days. So what I give as an analogy is if you went out and bought a brand new mahogany dining room table, you'd be really nice to it for 1 month. If you treat whatever you're painting and finishing with chalk paint and chalk paint wax with the same respect, it's going to hold up for you beautifully. But the beauty of this is if you ever do have an issue, it's very fixable. And that's really one of the key differences between this and like using a latex paint or other products on the market, is that you have the capability to fix things without always having to repaint them. Sometimes it's just cleaning up with a little bit more wax. Sometimes it just is simply buffing it out. If you do have something that occurs, you really can go back in and just touch up an area and then re-wax it in. I'm just getting rid of that line. So there's a whole story of how all the different waxes look, and we have one board, and that's all we did. So it's really pretty amazing. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was on this board. So first I'm going to take the brush with the white wax on it, and I'm just going to take off an area. Annie does a whole video where she shows, now this still has some texture. I sanded it just a little bit just because I didn't want to get a splinter. So many times I touch this old barnwood and then I end up getting splinters, and that wouldn't be fun. So you can take the white wax and go directly onto old barnwood, and it can really give you an interesting effect. Now, this wasn't very clean, so I might be getting a dirty white, but with what they're showing now, I think actually that could be quite lovely. See how little pressure I'm using. I'm not going at this like I'm scrubbing the kitchen sink. I am literally sliding it around. I actually came up with another analogy recently that I've been using. Now I feel like I missed a little bit here, so I can go in and just brush a little more. Now that part got really nice. Now if I wanted to, I could go back in and put just a little bit more. Sometimes the first layer really soaks it up. So I can go in and just add just a little bit more. How pretty that is. With everything, and actually, so feel this and now feel that. Now it's got to cure a little bit, but that would be totally usable. So that could be a picture frame, that could be a coffee table, that could be a mantle. I mean, that could be used for a ton of things. And you notice there's no smell. Like, to get that look before, you would have either gotten harsh chemicals out and played with it, or you would have had to, like what I'm going to do next, you would have had to get out stains, and then you would have had to have something to seal it. This does it all in one step, which is really where this product shines. So I'm gonna put tape on here. Go down here and do the dark wax. Where did I tuck it? There it is. Well, actually I'm gonna do the black wax since that's what's on my brush. And then we'll do the dark in the middle. I even have some antique guys who will come in. They'll have like old dressers, old tables, and they'll get like a little bit of watermarks on them or something. Sometimes you can just very lightly sand the top, so it like, because there could have been like a polyurethane on there or like an old shellac or something. You can just lightly sand the whole surface to kind of open the pores, and then go over it with, say, probably the dark wax, and it'll refreshen the whole top. We have a couple pieces, I think, in the shop here that were done that way, and it's really nice. But again, you're not having to get a stain and then seal it with something else. This kind of treats it. Oh, I know, my table over in front of the chalk paint area, that whole kitchen island was made using old barnwood like this, and I just sealed it with the dark wax. That was it, nothing else. So I'm gonna go in and just add a little bit more. Even it out a little bit. And what's nice is after this dries a little bit, if you wanted to, you can then even sand it, because you're kind of filling in the pores a little bit. And so if you wanted to make it softer and softer, you could sand it a little bit right on top of the wax. Actually, I'm going to do that. We have a sanding pad here, so on half of this I'm going to sand it. Now see, that filled in, but I can wash that right out because those are reusable. See how nice that is. So that really, it's got a little bit of the warmth back of the wood, but it's still a little bit dark, and that looks authentic, like nice old, like that would be a gorgeous mantle or a kitchen table, dining table. So that was the black wax. So see how different, but I really like how when I sanded it, it kind of brought back the warmth of it. And now in this part, black wax off and go back to the dark. One time we even did a table and we had done the whole thing in the dark wax, and it still wasn't, it felt like it was missing something. So we even then went over top of that with the black wax, and it kind of filled in and just gave it a nice richness. You just have to be careful you don't get splinters as you're doing this. Now after you've applied wax, like I said, you apply it, wipe it back. When I say wipe it back, you know, it looks like I'm working hard, but I'm just kind of trying to get the excess off the surface so it's not sitting on top. And you would let it dry, and then you could buff it out. But this is so porous, I think you could use it almost right away. I'm going to do the same thing. So you can see, so I can sand through to get some of that wood. You could even then paint right over top of this if you wanted to add some white on top of it. With paint, you could. Okay. So there's that whole board. You can really see a nice difference. Okay. Now, let me here and get the excess off. So that's like, you know, all the different uses of it. Now as far as using the wax, this is a kitchen cabinet door sample, which this would be applicable to, you know, painted furniture. And this is what it started as. So it really changes it just with the paint and the wax. If you did have to re-wax something, I'm gonna get these all over it, clean them up. What you can do, so say this was my kitchen cabinet or my bathroom vanity or anything like that, and it's been on a while. This probably was done maybe 6 months ago. I can go back in and take a little more clear wax and just go over it. Now when you do a second coat of wax, it takes even less wax, because what you're doing is you're reactivating what's already there. Let's see, I have a fuzzy, so let me get that out. And another one. So you don't need much at all. Kind of, you know, people like stress, are like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to go back and re-wax? Well, how many times have you like pledged your dining room table? It's not that hard to do. It, you know, it's just as needed. You might do it once a year, you might do it every 2 years, you might not ever do it. But, you know, we all wipe things down to make sure they're clean. All I'm doing is evenly spreading this out. Because what happens is, if I would brush this in, like you used to watch people wax and they'd be like scrubbing like this, like pushing the wax in as hard as they can. Well, what happens then is the wax gets burnished in one spot and it won't evenly spread out to the next spot. So if I go at it very, very lightly with no arm muscle, I get the whole surface evenly dispersed, and then I can rub it back or rub it in or wipe it back a little bit. And you want to flip your cloth occasionally, because if you keep rubbing it with the same spot on your cloth, it's not going to spread. No, feel that. That's all there is to it. Okay? Now it'll feel a little waxy for the first couple days. It's going to show fingerprints. All I do is take a rag and buff that right out. What I really like is after I put on my wax the first night, now I can't do it right now because I just put it on, but I would take an old rag. I love old washcloths that have been laundered 100 times, and you buff it out. I would say like the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Just buff it out a little bit, and then it's a decorative finish. So like if I had a cabinet like this, I want you to be using the pulls. I don't want you at it like this with wet hands. If you had a mahogany china cabinet, you would treat that with the same way. You would be using your knobs. You know, you wouldn't be slamming things into it, and you wouldn't be at it with wet hands. If you got wet hands on a nice piece of furniture, you would take a dry rag and you would wipe it off right away. That's what you do with this. You know, you're taking a nice piece of furniture or something that was a nice piece of furniture and just has gotten really sad, and you're refreshening it back up. To maintain this, you don't want to use any harsh chemicals. You don't want to use any pledge or any other chemicals anymore. All you need is a damp rag. If you want, you can use a mild Dawn dish soap and some water and scrub it down when needed. But your best bet is when you get a spill or something, you just take your rag and you wipe it off. And that's pretty much all you have to do. But as you know, you can take the clear wax and just occasionally give it a fresh coat if it's looking a little dull. You know, there might be one piece of furniture where you're always in the one drawer, you know, maybe right after you get out of the shower and you're getting your stuff together and it's gotten some fingerprints on it. Well, you could just give it a fresh coat of wax and you're good to go.